cab is at Ruscha. Sometimes it's spelled or it's pronounced Ruscha. I've always pronounced it Ruscha, so I will continue to do that. At any rate, Ruscha is an American artist from California, and he is famous for having painted and print. He's also a printmaker. Created these images that are extremely beautiful, if I can say that. They are just sharp. They have these strong contrasts and strong diagonals. They have a heroic tone. They are just appealing, but indeed they do look like, advertising on steroids, right? In other words, they really are pumped, and they create this heroic tone. The interesting thing about them is that in the case of this one especially, they seem to provide this heroism associated with um, things that are commonplace, right? Everyday experiences, such as pumping gas, right? And the name of the gas station is Standard Oil. Um, and the image is again banal, right? Pumping gas or putting gas into your car is something that we often find to be a chore. At least I do. It's like, oh, I'm running out of gas. I gotta go and get some. Um, and it seems like, it's an interruption of your day. But here, this particular experience has clearly been linked with a movie theater, right? I mean, there are these beams of spotlights or beams of light that are radiated behind the gas station, right? And then the standard sign kind of grows as it gets closer to us. And it creates again this heroic tone into the work. We see very much in the foreground the pumps themselves. The color contrast is intense. The images, or rather, the edges are sharp. It's clearly a heroic image. And it is large, right? So we're talking about, again, 5 feet by 10 feet. These are large works of art. Well, he not only painted gas stations in this way, but also a sign, right? This is a sign, 20th Century Fox, associated with a movie company. Here, it kind of makes sense to have the spotlights, right? Because after all, that logo that I will show you in a minute does have the spotlights, but that is precisely the point. The spotlights are seemingly present both in what it appears to be a logo, what appears to be that very famous sculpture of 20th Century Fox with the beams in the back, and also in this banal image of the gas station. So we have that situation in which there's this sameness of approach, right, to things that are perhaps special experiences, such as going to the movies, and then common experiences, such as putting gas into your car. There is this increasingly this banality, right, where experiences become equal, the same, right? Where there's no distinction between doing something that gives you great pleasure and an aesthetic experience, even such as going to the movies, and the experience of getting gas into your car. Both of them are put on the same level. And that's what these paintings tell us. But they also tell us a little bit about the values of the time, right? So let's begin with Standard Oil. Advertising is clearly a factor here. Just to give you two images from the time. This is a photograph from the 1960s that I did find online. But interestingly enough, the angle of the photograph is on the same direction or the same orientation as the standard in the painting, right? And that, of course, is a photographic effect. When you place your camera in front of a certain visual reality, the lenses will distort, and they will, and then the rectangular or square edges of the photograph will contribute to create a sense of perspective. And so that is imitated and exaggerated in the work of Ruscha. And so we can tell again that it's almost as if he's looking at this reality through a camera, right? Through the mediated experience, not provided by a photographic experience, not through his own very eyes. And then the same idea is in the ad, right? This is actually a credit card. Well, it's an ad for a credit card. That is a credit card allows us to buy things that we would not normally be able to afford, or perhaps it saves us some money. And this is a credit card issued by Standard Oil in the 1960s. And it it has a certain design in on one of the two sides that again use the same approach, the very heroic presentation of the sign with the crossing diagonal, right, of the car and the pumps, right. So again, we can tell that Russia is not necessarily looking at any one thing in particular, but clearly absorbing these experiences and this visual culture of the time provided by advertising, and then looking at reality through photography. And then the 20th Century Fox relates or refers to, of course, again this very famous image that we've all seen when we go see a movie that is made by 20th Century Fox, in which at the beginning of the film we have this again statue. What appears to be a really huge sculpture with buildings right from below that is very impressive, and it has the spotlights, right? And then there's this heroic music as well. That, of course, has to do with creating a certain expectation for the movie, right? When you look at something like this in the film, then you say, "Wow, what's coming next?" Right? This creates a sense of anticipation for the experience of the movie. And at the time, in the 1960s, this experience was enjoyed primarily from your car, right? So again, we are seeing some connections here. The emphasis on car, on the comfort of the car. Look at these seats, right? This is the Chevrolet Impala from the 1960s. These were the seats. There was nothing in between the driver and the passenger seat, which meant that again the two people could be close together. And in these movie theaters, which were outdoors, the drive-in movie theater. This one, by the way, is not in California; it's actually in Connecticut. But it's just an example of what it looked like. And the idea is that we are looking at comfort, right? At this sense of comfort, of enjoying the evening, perhaps with your boyfriend or girlfriend, and again the anticipation of the experience of the movie. It's a kind of life, but it is that is essentially a life of, I don't know if luxury, but great comfort, but it's accessible to everyone, right? Or at least to people who could afford it, actually, but in a way that it is promoted as accessible to everyone. And that is, in a way, this image that a lot of pop art is presenting and perhaps questioning, right? Now, how do we know that perhaps he's questioning it? Because these two works, they look really heroic. They look like they are praising and admiring and kind of bringing attention in a disproportionate way to this situation. But there are some paintings that Ruscha made, such as this one, that are very interesting because they also show another icon of California, the Norms restaurant. That was, again, we'll talk about it in a minute, but the restaurant itself was a fast food restaurant, right? Like it would be the equivalent of I don't know, not McDonald's really, but oh, well, I can't think of anyone right now. I'm thinking I have them in my mind, but I can't think of them. Any fast food restaurant where you sit for a while, right? Like a family restaurant. And IHOP, right? IHOP could be the ideal, and perhaps IHOP is actually inspired on Norms. But anyway, this is a California chain that was rather popular. So Ruscha paints norms in La Ciénaga, which is a street in Los Angeles, on fire. Now, the building or the restaurant never actually caught fire. This is part of a series in which Ruscha painted a number of buildings on fire, right? Which, fire is very devastating. It makes us very uncomfortable. It makes us feel very vulnerable, right? It puts into question what we have, right? Because all of a sudden it seems that a few flames can make it disappear. I'm sure you might remember, have fresh in your mind the Notre Dame experience, and watching that on TV was rather disturbing, right? This sense of something that has always been there all of a sudden is on fire and it is damaged, right? Well, so he paints this restaurant, which, by the way, never actually was on fire, uh, in flames, and it really perhaps is a reference to this the possibility that everything might disappear, right? This kind of life that is brought to us by consumer culture, by advertising that is promoted, that it might end up disappearing all of a sudden. But there's more to it. I just want to show you some photographs of norms, of course, nowadays, right? This is in one of the 17 norms that remain. Not very many remain in California. But one interesting fact about this was that the restaurant was founded by Norm Roybach, and that was his name, Norm. The word norm, of course, means rule, right? So when you say something is the norm, it looks like it's the rule. And so it seems again like the rules are on fire. This thing that is part of everyday life, that has become the norm, right? That has this kind of approach to life of going out to dinner has become the norm, is now in peril, is now in danger. So it's perhaps a word. It is a play of words because he used his name thinking about it in that way. The other interesting thing about this restaurant is that Norm Roybach was actually a car dealer before he founded the restaurant. And he designed the restaurant, or he commissioned an architectural firm to design the restaurant, making it look like a car dealership, right? And the seats that we are so familiar now with, the booth type of seat, is actually inspired in the car seats, right? The seats of the car. I think I have a picture here. No, I don't. The passenger seats, like the ones I was just showing you a little bit earlier, which are again long and wide and very comfortable. You can get close to the person you are sitting next to. These are not independent chairs. They are padded, right? I mean, I personally always choose the booth when I have a chance in any kind of restaurant. So he designs them in that way. And then the glass all around, right? This type of design, in which again very horizontal type of design, is also associated with the car dealerships of the time and of today. So a lot of restaurants nowadays have. I'm thinking of Panera Bread, for example, and maybe others will come to mind. But they have this design that is again very horizontal, a lot of glass, and that actually comes from this tradition of California, in which there's this imitation of the experience, the experience of comfort in the back of the car. And then the windows that appear to be like the windows of a car dealership, where you see the car through the window and everything looks very clean, right? Look at again the futuristic sort of design of the roof. It projects out, and interestingly enough, these triangles might evoke the flames, right? So what Ruscha is doing is he's putting everything in peril, right? He's almost saying this kind of life in which we go out to eat, in which we sit in a place that looks like or feels like a car. By the way, the restaurant is open 24 hours a day. It has always been. It's part of its tradition. So again, this sense of everything, all the time, this is always here. You can always go to Norms for breakfast, for lunch, or for dinner, or for any meal in between. It will always be there. This is the rule. And this kind of life, again, is put into question by Ruscha, right? So that's where we perhaps think that he's criticizing this society, not necessarily saying that everything is wrong, just seeing a dark side to it, right, or the possibility of its disappearance. And finally,